Welcome, Jonam, to another interview. Jonam and I met from the admins group in Empowered Ex Jehovah's Witnesses, and we both work as coaches. And his form of coaching is so interesting, and his story is so interesting that I wanted to bring him on to my channel and do an interview with him. So welcome, Jonam. So if you can just get started, tell us a little bit about your background, your Jehovah's Witness past, and then how did you go from the JWs to being a hypnotherapist and a therapist in general, and having your own program called Religion Rehab, which is also so profound.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me. So I was raised in the organization like many other people were. My beginning, I was very zealous. I very much took it on board, you know. As a small child, I would go to meetings and I'd get back and I'd be like making my own little mini presentations and performing my own little watchtower studies and getting my family to be the audience members. So I was really into it, even as a small child. And then when I was 6 or 7, my parents got divorced and disfellowshipped at the same time. So at that point, I'm the oldest son. So myself and my sister went with my mum. She was disfellowshipped. She got with my stepdad, and she stayed disfellowshipped for 8 years. But during that time, she was still very much a believer. And I took it upon myself as the spiritual head of the family to get myself and my sister and my mum, to an extent, 2 meetings. So from
how old were you at this point?
7 or 8 by that point.
Wow, that's a very big role to take on at such a young age.
Yeah, I was marriage counselor, I was spiritual head, I was taking my sister and arranging lifts to the assemblies and conventions and things like that. So it was, I took a lot on at that point. Throughout my teenage years, I tell you what, this is a weird thing. When I was around 14 or 15, I found this DVD, which was a data DVD, like just filled with files. And there was a folder on there, which was full of PDFs, like books and conspiracy theory stuff, wacky stuff, all the Davidite reptilians, overlords, like the whole thing. But my impressionable young teenage mind, I was reading this and was like, wow, maybe, well, at the very least, maybe the things I currently believe aren't true. So I started asking all these questions about the organization and saying, well, how can these other things, how does this all fit together? And that was the first moment where I really was subconsciously trying to wake up. But I think most of it, maybe you've had this experience too, where while we were in, there was some part of us that was trying to wake us up. It's like there's this little voice inside your head saying, hey, I've got some important things to tell you. And then our Christian conscience stood in and said, no, your temptation, your corruption, your sin. And so I ended up, I did take those questions to the elders and to other people. And the response I got, which should have given me a clue, was, well, you've been in the organization all your life. If you've not figured it out to be the truth by now, then you need to sort your head out. And the glutton for punishment that I was, it was like, oh yeah, well, I'm probably wrong. And so I suppressed those questions, was very unhappy in the organization on the whole. But I was still trying, and I would guilt trip myself for being unhappy because, well, if this is the true religion and this is the right place to be, and this is how you have a relationship with God and all of that, then if you're unhappy or if you're not feeling this this connection, then there's something wrong with you. So I really took my own self very personally. Then when I was in the mid to late teens, alongside that, I had this fascination with hypnotherapy and psychology. We spoke a bit before the call, how there was personal development and psychology was spoken about quite liberally in my house because my parents were formerly salespeople and it came with the territory of sales training. So the topic of the mind and of, how human beings work, how human nature works, it was always something we were allowed to talk about within the house. So that sparked my interest in NLP and hypnosis and just body language, all of that. So parallel to trying to be a good little Jehovah's Witness kid, I was also learning how to be a pretty effective hypnotist and various other things. So there's kind of a dichotomy there until I got disfellowshipped a couple of times. But the long story short is that the most recent time I was disfellowshipped, I forget the year, it was about 5 years ago now. And
so I'm just going to cut you off. So at like 14, 15, when you saw all this controversial stuff that you were talking about, you went to the elders. Were you living with your mom or your dad?
Mum, yeah.
So your mom at this point, was she reinstated? Because I know you said she was disfellowshipped for like 8 years. So that would put you at like...
I think she'd just been reinstated by that point, yeah.
And was that a question that you actually asked her about before you went to the elders? Or was that something you just went to the elders with because you're just like, my mom just got reinstated, she's not spiritually strong, let's just take this information to the elders?
You know, that's a good question. This is a while ago now. I think I spoke to her about some of my concerns. And her approach was very much with the best of intentions, but it's emotional blackmail. You know, it's oh, my kids want to leave the organization, and you know, it's like worse than them dying, and there's very much that kind of a thing. So that was the response from her. Yeah,
got it. So she got back in, and then you had to suppress those feelings, and then you went on with your life, and then you became interested in the mind, how we work, and more of a therapeutic body experience kind of experience. And your mom was okay with that. She knew that you wanted to go into that after you graduated from school, and she is like, she didn't really say yes or no. It's not something.
Yeah, she was always very supportive of that. In fact, she was the one who got me into it, really.
Wow.
So she introduced me to it. But the thing to know is my family were very much the outcast family of the congregation.
Got it.
So we were the ones who, you know, got ourselves to meet. My sister and I got ourselves to meetings. Congregation didn't really support us. When Mum got reinstated, she was not very well. She struggled with some health issues, isn't supported, I don't think, by the congregation. And so we're always outliers. So it's not like we were constantly in that central hub of everyone sort of reaffirming each other's little echo chamber. So we were outliers, still, you know, people of faith, let's say, but there was this sense of us and them because we were kind of ostracized. Yeah.
Got it. So you got disfellowshipped as a teenager, I would assume, your first time?
19 or 20, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I got baptized at 17 and I was disfellowshipped about 19 or 20, yeah.
Okay. And then you got back in, obviously.
Yeah, I tried.
What was your reasoning
really
to
hard.
get back in?
Well, it was the truth. And you know, I confessed myself. I was a chronic confessor. So I would do stuff wrong, like a little bit wrong, and then I'd go to the elders and say, "Oh, I'm doing this stuff that's a little bit wrong, like not full blown wrong, but a little bit porneer-ish, you know, or whatever it was." And so then then they'd be like, "Oh, well, you know, watch your step, check yourself, and we'll take away your privileges of service, you know, so you can focus on your study and your relationship with God." And then I'd you know, keep on going and keep on doing it, and then it's like, oh, God damn it, well, here we are. And then I'd go and confess, and it was this whole ritual of self-punishment, I think.
Wow. Yeah. And then you would get reinstated again. So how many times in total did you get disfellowshipped and then reinstated? So you got disfellowshipped at 19, 20, and then you got reinstated, I would assume, like 6 months, a year later, since you got
about
disfellowshipped.
18 months later, yeah.
18 months, okay, so that took some time.
Yeah, they took their time. That was a whole adventure in itself. But yeah, I got disfellowshipped once. I applied multiple times. I think it was about 4 or 5 times before they reinstated me. And that's a really stressful experience. I don't know if you experienced that or
yeah, I wrote 4 letters and I got rejected every time.
God.
So then I stopped after 2 years, 4 letters. I'm like, enough.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm right there with you. So you were still going to the same congregation that you got disfellowshipped at, and your mom was still there. Were your siblings also there with you?
Yeah. Yeah. So the first time, because I was still living at home at that point, my family was all very, very supportive, and I was still trying to get reinstated, so it was all fine. Then I finally got reinstated, and almost immediately ended up sinning again. And now I was like, look, do you know what? I'm going through a bunch of difficult things at that point in my life. I can't be dealing with another judicial process. So I lived this kind of double life for about a year. And so pretended to be a good JW at meetings, did all the right things, said all the right answers. And then, on the other half of my life, I was off, having adventures and being kind of self-destructive with the way I was having relationships and things of that nature. After about a year, I decided to clean my life up. I spoke to some Jehovah's Witnesses on the south coast somewhere, I think Southampton, and pretending that I wasn't actually a witness. I just had a conversation to get some encouragement. So I was like, no, I'll straighten my act up. And the long story short, I ended up dating this witness girl, and we were doing well, and it was all very serious and all very loved up and honorable intentions and all of that. And then you'll notice a theme developing here. So then we ended up committing porneia of some form, and then maybe that should be the title for the episode.
Thing. Gosh.
We were talking before this about what to name this episode. It's like porneia will be involved.
Porneia, hypnotherapist, ex-Jehovah's Witness. Yay! I support you.
Well, it sums up a lot. So we, being good little JWs, wanted to go and ask the elders for support so that we could conduct the rest of our courtship in a way that's pleasing to Jehovah and all of those sentiments. And they privately reproved her, and in my judicial committee, they coerced is the correct word. They coerced me into revealing information I didn't want to reveal, and so that they dug up all this stuff from my past and sort of retroactively disfellowshipped me for that. Okay,
and that was the last time you got disfellowshipped.
Yeah, but I tried to get reinstated for another 2 years. So this girl and I, we weren't speaking to each other, but we were still kind of holding on for each other, and so kept going and going and going. And after about 2 years, or after a year and a half, I messaged her. I was like, look, I've applied 4 or 5 times now. They're not letting me back. You need to get on with your life. There's only so much time. And then after 2 years, there were some other things kicked off in my life which were kind of dramatic, and I just thought to myself, I can't keep going to a place that has proven that they don't value me. I've also reached the point where I realized they need me more than I need them. And so even though I still believed in the doctrines, I just felt, well, the organization, it didn't give me anything. It's not giving me anything. And I'm a far better asset to them, and I'm trying to go in, and they keep turning me away. So at that point, I cut us off. I stopped going, and I started moving on with my life and developing my career.
And so this girl that you were dating, she also went her own way. Is she still a part of the organization?
She's still in the organization. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm not sure what she's doing now. But okay. I feel bad for her. I was thinking of this recently because it's there were very sincere and very good intentions there from both of us, and because of the way the organization worked, she ended up, and I suffered as well, but I think she suffered more because of me being out, and it's just totally unnecessary. It didn't have to be that way. So yeah, I'm not sure what she's doing now.
Wow. So you decided not to go back anymore. And what was the situation like with your mom? Did she also stop talking to you and your siblings?
So by that point, I was living in London. My siblings were a bit quiet with me, but my mum was still in contact. And I was still a believer. I wasn't practicing or trying to get reinstated, but I wasn't anti anything. I was just getting on with life and being busy with things. And it wasn't until I started my own activism work, and that was when they reached out and, you know, officially cut me off and were very vocal, let's say.
This was in 2020.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
it was.
So you joined some of the ex-Jehovah's Witness Facebook groups, and what sparked this specific religion rehab that you have right now?
Yeah. So when I moved to the countryside at the beginning of lockdown, and I noticed that there was this sense of anxiety, just this feeling inside me that was not good. And that's not me at all. I'm not an anxious person. My baseline is very much, you know, just calm, happy, positive, all of that. And so to feel this sense of anxiety, and I think most of us know the feeling. It's like your body is going into fight or flight mode, and it's getting ready to deal with some threat. So it's a very physical feeling. And I was like, well, life's okay, life's good. And yeah, there's this pandemic thing, but it's, you know, I'm not under imminent threat of anything. And then I realized that it was in the back of my mind, this little voice saying, well, what if they're right? Why the JWs had it right? What if this is the beginning of the Great Tribulation, and there is this theocratic line in the sand, and you're the wrong side of it, and all of this stuff with which every one of us is familiar with, I think. And at that point, I got sick of myself. You reach this point when you're dealing with a problem, when it's this idea of getting over yourself comes in. It's like, look, I'm bored of feeling this way. I've felt this way for too long. I'm a grown-ass adult. I'm not going to tolerate this for any longer. And I reached that point. I was like, I've been on too many trainings. I've paid too much money on too many qualifications and certifications and all of this to actually tolerate this from myself. And so I finally gave myself the permission to say, with honest intentions, let's do my due diligence, that either this is the true religion or it's not the true religion. But if they're asking me to invest my life in it, then like with any investment, you need to do your due diligence, find out if it's a worthwhile investment. So I did that, and needless to say, found out everything I needed to find out to decide that, look, they are, by their own definition, they're false prophets and shouldn't be listened to.
So you did your own research, you went online and you looked at some like Google searches with the Jehovah's Witnesses and the history?
Yeah, Google and the XJW subreddit was very helpful. JW Facts, it was, you know, had a bunch of good research there, and also cross-referencing it. I think the first port of call was Crisis of Conscience. I think that was my first port of call. Yeah. And from there the research just spanned, and it didn't take long. It took maybe a couple of days really for it to sink. It was quicker than that even. A lot of people I've spoken to, maybe you and whoever's listening to this can relate, where it's like the first time you allow yourself to look at apostate material, there's this like adrenaline rush as if you're doing something really naughty, but then you end up going through the night to sort of 4 or 5 in the morning, just reading, and it just reaches this threshold point.
Wow. So you were doing that in 2020.
Yeah.
And then was there kind of like this light that came to you, like, I need to create something to help other witnesses or ex-witnesses in the transition period?
Yeah, the thing I noticed most prominently was that there was so much great material on YouTube and all over the internet on debunking the doctrines or proving the corruption and fraud and just general inadequacy of the organization. So that's really good. That's really important. But it's not the entire journey. And the way I describe it is a bit like if someone is in a car accident. My parents were in a really bad car accident, so this is a reference point I'm familiar with. When someone's in that car accident, they need to be cut out of the car, right? So you cut them out of the car, you put them into the ambulance, and then they move on. But that's not the entire journey. They need to be taken to the hospital, go to intensive care, go to have all of this stuff done. Then there's rehabilitation, learning to walk again, or getting back into living life. And so what I noticed in the XJW world was that there were so many paramedics and firefighters cutting people out of the car, so to speak. Lots of information saying, look, here, these doctrines are false, the organization is wrong, and you need to get out.
Mm-hmm.
But what there was a shortage of was therapeutic support,
mm-hmm.
and practical advice on how can you deprogram yourself? How can you get there, not just the doctrines, but also the other beliefs like I'm unworthy of kindness, or the world is out to get me, or worldly people aren't honest, or those little discrete insidious things. How can I get those programs out? How can I build healthy relationships? How can I heal from the emotional pain of shunning? There were very few resources to help with that. And that was my own skill set from the therapeutic training that I'd been in. So it became very obvious that I could contribute to the conversation from this perspective. I don't speak too much in terms of going against the organization, just because there are other people who do it far better than I do.
Yeah.
I can speak to things like mind control and brainwashing and mass hypnosis, and I can speak to that, but my real focus and my real specialism is in recovery and moving forward.
I think that's fantastic. And then did you start advertising yourself in the Facebook groups? How did you develop that trust? Because as I know, as you know, it's really hard to trust people once you leave the organization, especially when you think about hypnotherapy. So that's another thing I wanted to ask you as well. What has your experience of hypnotherapy been in the ex-Jehovah's Witness space because of this whole witchery and demonic mentalization in this world, if you will?
Yeah. When I first found all of these communities, well, first off, I was surprised because I thought that I was the only person, or one of maybe 5 people in the UK who'd been disfellowshipped. I was that naive. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but I did not expect there to be tens of thousands of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses online. And so seeing this great crowd was very, in itself, that was an awakening moment for me. So rather than assume that I knew what other people needed, I thought, well, yes, we've come from the same organization, but we've all had different experiences. So I put together a survey in the middle of 2020. I decided I was going to run a podcast. And so I put this survey together to find out what people were struggling with, what their stories were. And I've told the story elsewhere, but it's a good story. My goal was to get 10 responses to the survey, because if you have 10 responses, you'll start to see some themes will emerge. A few people will say some things that match up, so you can identify what's a common need. Basic market research. Within a few days, I had over 250 responses to this survey. Wow. And the average time, because in the software I used, it tells you how long people spend on their answers, or how long they spend filling it in. The average duration that people took to fill that survey out was over 40 minutes.
Wow.
And so in terms questions? Of I can't remember how many questions. It was maybe 20 or so. But people were giving really, considered and thought out answers.
Wow.
So valuable. And when I was reading that, this was, hundreds and hundreds of hours worth of people's contribution to it. So I got to see what the common needs were, what the common questions were and challenges. So that's how the podcast and the project started. in terms of the hypnotherapy, where I went from there, I decided rather than just go out there and say, no, hey, I'm Mr. Hypno Wizard. I said, I'm Mr. Hypno Wizard, and here's a workshop to explain a bit about it. And so I did a workshop talking about how hypnosis and mind control work and how the organization used it against us and how we can use it as a tool for our own healing. So, so explaining it all from a very down-to-earth, very scientific point of view, there isn't anything mystical or magical about it. It's hard, verifiable science at this point.
So you're telling me you don't have a magic wand in that closet behind you?
I have multiple closets behind me. Which one? There's a magic closet, there's a liquor closet, and there's another one that I won't tell you about.
Oh, well, it must have all your pornea in it and your pornea gadgets.
Yeah, just ignore the full sounds from the background. But yeah.
It's so interesting. So you started the podcast and you started the project around the same time. And the podcast, is it you interviewing people? What is your format with the podcast?
Mostly it is, yeah. So the very first person who I interviewed was an internationally acclaimed author, and he owns a place called Mind Control Publishing. And he's written something like 30 books or so about hypnosis and mind control and cults. And so what I really wanted to do was introduce people to ideas and concepts that they otherwise wouldn't be exposed to. I love the quote that a mind once stretched by a new idea can never return to its original dimensions.
Ooh, and so that's really good.
Yeah, I can't remember who said it, but they were a smart cookie. And so I wanted to interview, yes, former members, but especially people who had made progress, or experts and authors in different fields, to provide these different perspectives, because a different perspective gives you new insights, and new insights give you that raw material to make new decisions. So that was the intention of the podcast. Generally, it's me interviewing people. I've done a few where it's just me talking, but I'm interviewing authors, experts in various fields, and former members, either just people who have interesting stories. And I especially love interviewing people who have made progress for themselves and are living proof that recovery is possible. And what's really fascinating to me is that there are some guests who I've been geeking out about interviewing, like internationally acclaimed, real just high-level people in their industries. And so me as the psychology nerd, I'm giddy with excitement. And those episodes, they just get the average number of listens, which is still a good amount, but it's just an average number of listens. Whereas when I've interviewed a former Jehovah's Witness, and people who have made their way, and maybe then they're within the realms of what you'd call normal, but that journey in itself of leaving the organization and building a normal life is very heroic. And those are the episodes that skyrocket. Like, people love listening to it. And I think it's because it's so encouraging to say, yes, this is possible. Recovery is possible.
Absolutely. And I always say your life right now, it does not have to be what your life is like a year from now. It could be a completely different life. You don't have to be where you are right now. Your life can transform into whatever you want it to be. And walking through fear is really essential. And I'm sure you already know this, but fear is never ending. I mean, hundreds of years ago, we were fighting wild animals. This fear is a natural part of our life. Now fear comes in any shape, size, and now the organization fear, we're hanging on to it. So if we're just constantly living in fear, it's this muscle that's going to get strengthened. But if we kind of worked against that fear and just actually constantly do things to make the fear kind of the background, we can gain strength in that and get more courageous as that. And you are living proof of that by actually doing things that are kind of against the religion, but you found your own way to do it. And then with this podcast, I'm actually curious too, the people that are experts in the field, none of those are actually witnesses or ex-witnesses. They're all kind of experts in their field. Okay. And I also think that there's not that many therapists, coaches, counselors, body workers in the ex-Jehovah's Witness world. A lot of people like want help. And I know we talked about this before. I've messaged you about this before, but I think that a lot of ex-witnesses think that they should just get stuff for free, which is I can do like a whole episode on that too. It's just like, no, it's not how it works. We have this experience so we can help other people, and we've dealt with our own demons. So again, so we can help other people.
Well, we didn't get our training for free.
No, absolutely not. No, absolutely not.
You pay peanuts and you'll get monkeys. That's the expression.
I loved that expression. That is such a great expression. And I also think, as you said before to me in the message, like everyone wakes up at a different time, and everybody has their own way of waking up. So somebody might listen to this episode and they might be like, oh shit, like I need to like really wake up. Whereas somebody might read that book that you mentioned, Crisis of
Conscience. Yeah.
Yes. Somebody might see the documentary from Vice. I forget what that one's called.
Yeah.
Somebody might like be watching Papa Smurf and be like, this is not that bad. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, Papa Smurf is the Smurfs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it literally could be anything. You can be at the Kingdom Hall and you watch. I saw elders who are probably like over 60 check out little girls that are 8, 9 years old. That might be your wake up call. I mean, there's so many different things that could be your wake up call, and it could be anything. It could really be anything. So to point out one various thing, or you might go like you did and really tune in on YouTube and watch all the activism and just get really entrenched in that and spend 18 hours doing like a YouTube marathon of watching. It's so crazy. So it's how people wake up is so various and all their different things. With your podcast, would you say that you have an underlining theme of people that you work with, and just besides the stories that people are telling, what would you say is like your underlying theme of like your elevator pitch for your podcast?
Yeah, my intention with the podcast is that it's practical and actionable resources to support people in waking up. And when I say waking up, I mean the process of waking up isn't just realizing that the doctrines are false or the organizations are con. Like that's, people say I woke up in such and such a year, and it's like, no, that's not waking up. That's, you know, your eyes are flitted open, and you know the bed's kind of cozy, and you're laying in bed, and you're technically awake, but you still need to get out of bed, get dressed, get on with your day. Like there's more to it than just finding out the organizations are con. And so that's the part of the journey that can be daunting, that continuing to wake up. Once we wake up from the deception and deceit and the programming, well, you need to wake up to your own potential, to your own passions and your own talents, and what you really want to do with the time that you have left here. So it's an ongoing journey, and the intention with the podcast and all of the resources, I've made so many free resources on the Religion Rehab website. The intention with all of them is to provide practical tools to help people break through those barriers, because understanding is one thing, but actually being able to practically and experientially break through the challenges, that's different to knowledge, that's experience.
Totally agree with you. So I'm going to put your link for your Religion Rehab link on there. I'm going to put a link for your podcast episode, or your podcast in general, because I think that would be really awesome to listen to. You've been doing that for 2 years?
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, awesome. And then if you want to add anything else to this episode, I would love to hear it.
Thank you. Yeah, I would be, it would be a failure on my part if I didn't speak a little bit about the question that we were speaking about beforehand, which is how to go about waking up, or also
yes,
waking other people up.
Please.
If we have time to speak about that for a couple of minutes. Yeah. So especially if we have loved ones who are in the organization, we can be very focused on how can I wake them up? What information can I send them? What memes, what videos or articles can I send to wake them up? And understandably enough, but there are a couple of things that we need to bear in mind, and it's kind of zooming back. There's so much information out there. At the moment, my favorite YouTube channel is for that side of things is Millstone Research with Charlie. It's just phenomenal, just really great information in terms of waking up. So you end those videos knowing more about the organization than most Jehovah's Witnesses do. So
maybe I can link that in the notes.
Yeah, definitely check it out if you haven't already. But just great research. But here's the challenge: is that when someone is in and when they're believing it, you could show them everything that they need to know to make the right decision, and they'll go apostate lies, mentally diseased, or all of these parries. They'll just it doesn't matter what it is. If they feel that you're trying to force them to wake up, they will dismiss it. And unless they are already in the place where they're ready to wake up. Mm-hmm. So, and the chances of that are small if they haven't already woken up. So
like less than 5%.
Yeah. So we have to be strategic about it and say, well, what's most likely to get results? So the first one is like we said previously, you can't wake somebody up if you're still participating in their dream. So if we're still, if to take this laying in bed metaphor, if someone's like laying in bed next to you and they're asleep, and you've just opened your eyes and you start poking them, hey, you should wake up and get out of bed. They'll say, screw you, you wake up and get out of bed, or go back to sleep, it's too early. It's not going to work. What we need to do is get on with our own lives and move forward in our own recovery. In my work, I always focus on the 3 areas of our mind, so our thoughts, our beliefs, our subconscious patterns, our emotions, and our emotional well-being, and also our relationships, specifically how we relate to the outside world, family, loved ones, career, boundaries, this whole matrix. When you're making progress in that area and you're moving on with your life, you're then setting the example that proves that you can get out, you can heal, and it's not impossible, but also that it's not unsafe, because there might be people in your family or in your social group who have their doubts, but they think, well, if I leave, then I'm going to live a miserable life. I'm going to end up living on the streets, addicted to some kind of substance, and I'm just going to be a prostitute, and that's it, because that's what we got told.
Exactly.
And so when you become a living example of the fact that that's not true, then you're being a product of the product. You're promoting freedom, but you're also embodying freedom. So that's one side of it. The other side, in terms of persuading people, that there's a fascinating principle called reactance. Reactance is where if someone feels like you're trying to influence them, they will do the opposite of what you say, like reverse psychology. My favorite example of this is in, I think it was New York City. They made a sign, like a road sign. And how many times when we're walking down the street, will you reach out and touch a road sign? Like, you just won't. Wouldn't occur to you to do it. This road sign said, do not touch this sign. And they had a camera on it. Thousands of people were touching the sign, taking selfies of themselves, touching the sign. It became this hashtag. It was this whole thing. And you would never, ever touch a road sign, apparently, unless you're told not to. So this is built into human nature. It's really weird and it's really funny, but it applies to this as well. A great resource for negotiations and influence in general is a guy called Chris Voss, Voss. He wrote a book called Never Split the Difference, and his company is called the Black Swan Group. And he's a former FBI hostage negotiator. And so it's just an absolute goldmine of information, talking about how to go about negotiations in a way that is ethical, is empathetic, and is mutually respectful, and has a high likelihood of success. And so the reason I recommend that, and this is a huge topic that we could talk for a long time about as well, but the reason I recommend that is because if something has had to work in the context of hostage negotiations or bank robberies or terrorists, if something's been field tested in those conditions, then it can probably be helpful to us in terms of our own lives, whether that's trying to wake up family members or whether that's simple things like how to set boundaries. We've mentioned briefly, if there are people listening to this who are trying to go self-employed, whether it's as a coach or a healer or just self-employed in general, you will get people who try to push your boundaries. Nobody goes to the supermarket and says, hey, can I get my shopping for free? But they will go to a self-employed person of any industry and say, oh, you're charging this much, or you're making money off people suffering and things of that nature. So you need to have this boundary control in place to be able to be professional about it. And by developing skills through training and through learning and through practice, it makes setting boundaries a lot easier. So even if the family situation doesn't change, maybe just the relationships improve, but they stay in the organization, you're still developing the skills you need to navigate your life. And again, always focusing on that, the journey of your own awakening. How are you moving forward and healing and becoming more of who you actually truly are, and having that practical focus on, how can I make my life better right now? Am I using the freedom that I have in a way that makes that freedom look tempting or look worthy of emulation? And that can be really helpful just to bring us back to that central point where you can focus on what's really important and what really resonates with you.
I love that. I'm right there with you. I mean, I'm living in the jungle of Costa Rica, and I just need Wi-Fi, and I'm living this beautiful life with my now husband. He's my second husband. So I share a lot of my life on social media, and I'm like, if my mom and my relatives that are witnesses could see me right now, I kind of want them to be like, what the heck kind of life? She's obviously not a user of heroin. I'm not a prostitute. I'm doing some really awesome things, and I'm helping people. So I'm right there with you. Like, why not make your life almost like, wow, that's an admirable life that you could be living, that you can be achieving, and it's just on the other side. It's just on the other side. It really is. It takes work, obviously, but it's just on the other side. So I'm right there with you, Jonam. That's so important to have that realization. And Chris Voss, I'm gonna look at that book right after we hang up the call. I think that's such an interesting read. I think that'll be fascinating to read, because I think talking to people and even convincing them of just silly things sometimes, it's a great, one of the first books that I read for that is How to Win Friends and Influence People. I'm sure you read
Dale
that.
Carnegie,
Yes, oh yes. That was like one of my first reads in that kind of department a couple of years ago. So it's just so interesting. The thing is, and I'm sure you know, that there's not very many people who are actually really interested in other people. So showing general interest in somebody else besides just the organization stuff. Like I told a client yesterday who was trying to talk to his daughter about, does she really want to be a witness anymore? I said, you have to take away the whole Jehovah's Witness stuff and just really ask her to critically think about certain situations bigger than the organization, make the organization look really small. So when it comes to actually thinking for yourself, The religion doesn't allow you to do that. So when maybe you ask your mom, your sister, your cousin, your relative, your daughter, your spouse, what is your why to the reason you're still in the religion? Can we talk about that? Oh, you feel safe. So why do you feel safe inside of the Kingdom Hall if they're doing this and this? Or, oh, your friends are part of the religion. Okay, so you're going to leave the religion, you're going to lose your friends. Is that really friendship? Like, just really question things like
Mhm.
the bigger than the religion. This for me is like a really very basic, but it takes a different look on the whole spectrum of being a witness and as an outsider. So you're not really like we both are not interrogating the religion. The religion is a horrible thing, horrible situation that people are put into, but just really, it's a choice people make, and then just kind of question it and just kind of work around that, because that's more compassionate. You're not attacking anyone, you're not attacking anything. Everyone has a reason why they're still in the religion, why they still are holding on to these beliefs. So just being really nice about it, because if you're attacking people, you're going to get nowhere fast.
Yeah, you attack people and they'll lock themselves up, and you will prove them right, because their idea of apostates is someone who attacks and is critical and is angry and aggressive. And so if you're proving them right, then that just totally undermines the whole purpose.
Right.
And so think of it in terms of outflanking challenges. If you know that there's a point where, look, that's a point of no, the immovable object meets an unstoppable force kind of situation. So we'll avoid that part of the conversation, but we can outflank it. And we have the same, that strategy applies elsewhere. And I've just remembered that I half answered your question earlier. So speaking about how people have found these, or all of this psychological information that we're talking about, that we could go on for hours about, is, and it would feel like minutes because time flies, when it came to the hypnosis and hypnotherapy, as I was sharing that with people, I found that when you explain the science behind it and tell them how it works, tell them how it has been used on them already, and about how this is a natural part of life going into this learning state. The question is, how do you want to use it? What do you want to learn? What do you want to unlearn? And so at the beginning of last year, at the beginning of 2021, I did a hypnotherapy study where I had about 20, maybe 30 XJWs go through this hypnosis program that I put together, just to see if people found it helpful. And we had incredibly positive feedback. Like, people found healing around the relationships that they'd lost to the organization because of shunning, breaking through triggers and religious triggers around Armageddon or birthdays and Christmas. We had great results with. And so from there, that was really the seedling out of which grew the religion rehab project. And in terms of gaining people's trust, which is an important thing for anyone in any kind of business, is that know, like, and trust factor. People have to know you, people have to like you, which is kind of subjective, and then they have to trust you. And so just through being present and through trying to be consistent, in conversations like this, or listening to my podcast, or reading my Facebook, whichever, people get a sense, like, we're all deep down, we all have this sense of who we resonate with versus who we don't. And like we've all had the experience, I think, of meeting someone, and then there's this, you feel this sense of instant connection. It's like, even though we've only just met, it feels like I've known you for years, and it feels like I'm going to know you for years, perhaps. And there's just this feeling of familiarity, and we all know when that happens. And so I think just over time, that's what's created this sense where people know who I am. I'm not like a hard, pushy sales guy. I don't believe in that. I'm like, we've been pressured and sold to all our lives. My approach is very much, look, here's what I do, here's why it works, here's who I am. If you like the sound of all of that, then let's have a chat. And if not, no problem. That's really as simple and as complicated as it needs to be. It can be so simple and so straightforward. And it's just knowing that you have that support in the next steps. And that's why I feel great about speaking with you is that I know that you're doing great work in supporting people, and another place and another perspective that's just as valuable as mine is. And we'll both relate, you know, there'll be crossover, but there'll be some people who relate more to you and some who relate more to me. And but collectively we're all working towards the same thing, which I believe is that freedom from spiritual tyranny, this freedom from any kind of tyranny and authoritarianism, is gaining that personal sovereignty back. And we're all working towards that goal together. And even if someone's not a coach or a healer, they're, through their example, they are helping that cause. And I find that really, really encouraging to me to keep going with this as well.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It has no religious connotation, but it's your own spiritual journey and path. So it is a spiritual experience because you're experiencing it within yourself, and you're having that kind of experience that's way bigger than a religion, in my perspective. So I love it. Thank you so much for sharing and for being on. I think that this is, I hope that we're going to stay in contact with each other. I'm going to list all the links that I mentioned. I'm going to look forward to reading that book. That's going to be my next read. So thank you so much for joining me today, Jonam. I really appreciate your time. So much great information in this podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Until next time.